So it's a bye week for the San Francisco 49ers, but there's never a bye week right here on the 49ers Report. And coming up on today's show, we're going to try to find solutions for why this football team is struggling going into the bye week. A very good football team awaits into Sundays in the Jacksonville Jaguars. So coming up on today's show, some changes that the Niners need to make to become a better football team, end this 3-game losing streak during the bye week. First, though, if you're confident that the Niners can get back on track and look like the team that started 5-0 instead of the team that since that point has gone 0-3, I want you to hit that thumbs up icon and like the video. If you don't have confidence in this club, I want you to comment why. Bye week change number 1. This is a very important one, and it's paramount for this squad. The pass rush has to get home. San Francisco's inability during this 3-game losing streak has been a problem, and their inability to finish and sack the quarterback has led to the defense getting shredded, especially in back-to-back weeks against Kirk Cousins as well as Joe Burrow. And the number to focus on here is 18. The San Francisco 49ers are tied for 18th among 32 teams in the NFL with only 18 sacks. If after 8 games I would have told you that with this defense that the Niners would only have 18 sacks, you'd probably think that would be a problem, and maybe you would project that the Niners are having issues on the defensive side of the football. That's exactly what's happening with this team. You look at the Niners sack leaders. I need these numbers to get better. You made the trade deadline acquisition for Chase Young. He immediately becomes number 1 in sacks on this team with 5. Nick Bosa, highest paid non-quarterback in the history of football, he has a lot of quarterback pressures, a lot of quarterback hits. His pass rush win rate is really good, but he only has 3 sacks. He's come close to sacking the quarterback, but close but no cigar. It's not going to cut it in a results-driven business. Javon Hargrave hasn't done anything since week 3 against the New York Giants. Him and Bosa are getting double-teamed a lot, and a lot of the other players along this defensive line haven't been able to take advantage of those matchups. Drake Jackson has 3 sacks. That's tied for second on this team. Guess what? All 3 of those sacks came in week 1. We're now going into week 9. And then Arik Armstead, pretty much held in check as far as his sack total goes up until last week's game against Cincinnati when he was able to notch 2. So getting home, sacking the quarterback, finishing makes the back end's job a lot easier. And in turn, I think it'll massively help this Niners defense fix some of the issues that they've been having, especially the last 2 weeks. Change number 2, fix the secondary. This is a tall test for defensive coordinator Steve Wilks. In those aforementioned last 2 weeks, Kirk Cousins, 35 of 45, 378 yards. He was cooking on 3rd down. Joe Burrow last week, 28 of 32, 365 yards. When you combine Kirk Cousins and Joe Burrow against this defense, which was number 1 in the NFL last year and is just as talented, if not more talented, those 2 signal callers have gone to combine 63 of 77. That is unacceptable, and Steve Wilks has to figure it out. Some chat stats on this Niners passing defense. In Week 8, Joe Burrow only threw into tight coverage 9.4% of the time. That was the 5th lowest mark in Week 8. The week before that, on the road against Minnesota, Kirk Cousins only threw into tight coverage 6.7% of the time. That was the 2nd lowest mark in Week 7. There are a couple of different reasons for why that's happening. Niners haven't been able to generate that consistent pass rush. The secondary is having to hold up a little bit too long in coverage, but also this defensive front and this back end are not in sync. It's part of the reason why this defensive unit for San Francisco and this organization has really been so good going back to Robert Saleh and D'Amico Ryans, because there was that synergy. There was that continuity from the defensive line to the linebacking core at that 2nd level to the secondary at that 3rd level. This year, though, the front and back end are not in sync. That has to get changed in the bye week as well. And I thought what Richard Sherman said about the changes that he would implement for this Niners defense pretty interesting. He said, look, if I'm the defensive coordinator, we are going back to the fundamentals here. We're going back to the things that we do well. We're not running man on 1st and 2nd down like the Niners have been doing. I'm not a big fan of it. I don't think they're sound. We're going to mix it up moving forward. Our defensive line is going to have to get hot like they've been doing, and they've done the last few years, for you to take them out of what they do well and for you to sit there and run gains and stunts and do all of these other things instead of just ears back, get after the quarterback like these guys have specialized in the last 3-4 years. I got to be honest. It's weird, Sherman said. It's weird, and I think Kyle Shanahan has had enough. I think this is the straw that broke the camel's back, and I think that there will be changes next week. And some of those changes that Sherman kind of relayed there, they all seem to make some sense. And if you think about it, right, if you're running a twist stunt, it's going to take a little bit longer for Nick Bosa when previously he would go from point A, bull rush, point B to the quarterback. Now he's having to come across some defensive linemen. He's having to wait on some of those stunts and pulls, and it just delays the pass rush a little bit. And Nick Bosa's been so close to racking up more sacks. Milliseconds off. Those milliseconds, you can cure that by not having to run all those stunts. From time to time, of course, you want to be able to do that to mix up your looks. Not all the time and not as often as what Steve Wilks is doing. Before we continue to move forward with our changes during the bye week for this team, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We are closing in on 100,000 subs, and once we get there, we're getting that silver plaque from YouTube. We're currently sitting at 99,334 people who are subscribed to this program worldwide, and what you get in the process, if you do hit that sub button, some of the most informative, entertaining, and insightful Niners coverage every day and year round. Prize Picks is our sponsor for today's show. We can get you hooked up with the best daily fantasy sports app, and in the process, you get up to a $100 deposit match. All you have to do, plug in that link at the bottom of your screen, prizepicks.com/CLNS, and use the code CLNS. The game that Prize Picks has really mastered, you choose more or less on 2 or 3 athletes' projected stat totals, and it makes game days a whole hell of a lot of fun. And what's cool is that now that the NBA season is here, you can combine your NBA picks as well as your NFL picks. The picks that I'm rocking with this week as to kind of monitor the situation here going into Week 9, biggest game on Sunday, Philadelphia Eagles, Dallas Cowboys. A lot of implications for San Francisco considering both of those teams really good in the NFC. DeAndre Swift, more than 61.5 rushing yards. Jake Elliott, more than 1.5 field goals, and Dak Prescott, I think he's going to be able to air it out against that Philadelphia defense. 253.5 passing yards. I like the more there. So one more time, code CLNS. We're going to put that link down below in the comment section as well as in the description of this video. Look, we're closing in on 100,000 subscribers. A big reason why we can land a great sponsor like Prize Picks, the largest independently run daily fantasy sports app in North America, is because of all of your support. Let's continue to progress on today's show. Another point of emphasis here for San Francisco as we shift over to the offensive side of the football, the Niners have to stop turning the rock over. They're coughing it up. They're getting far too sloppy. When the Niners got off to that 5-0 start, they took the league by storm, best all-around team in football. They were +7 in turnover margin. Since going 0-3 and falling to 5-3 on the year, they are -3. And take a look at where these turnovers and missed field goals have happened on the field. The Niners have been close to scoring a lot of points. They haven't been able to capitalize, and this really bucks their momentum here. Against Cleveland, and I count missed field goals as turnovers, by the way, because it basically is. If you kick a ball from the 45-yard line, like the other team gets the ball at the 45-yard line, really good field position. So turnovers or missed field goals. Cleveland 36, Cleveland 23, Minnesota 15, Minnesota 22, Minnesota 49, Minnesota 40, Cincinnati 8 on that awful Brock Purdy interception on that broken shovel pass play, and then on the Cincinnati 26. So those turnovers have happened at inopportune times, and it's taken points off the board. How close was that Cleveland Browns game? 1 score. How close was that Minnesota game? 1 score. that Cincinnati Bengals game was close until they were able to pull that one out at the end and end up winning by a couple of touchdowns. Next up, Kyle Shanahan and this Niners team, they have to diversify the offense if we can go back to that, because this is an offense that has not been well-rounded. In fact, it's been one-dimensional. And George Kittle talked about that after the Bengals loss. The 49ers have fallen from behind in a lot of these games, and because of that, they've turned into a one-dimensional offense in which they're throwing the football a lot, and because of that, they've become predictable. Teams have been able to read and guess upon what they're doing, and in turn, they become a one-dimensional offense. And when you're a one-dimensional offense, you're throwing too much, and the strength of your football team is to run it, and Brock Purdy is at his best when you have that run-pass approach. You just become a lot more easy to defend, and that's been an issue during this 3-game skid. Up next, we've talked about this here on the show. Why I've been so frustrated with this team is they've been ill-prepared, they've been sloppy, and they've shot themselves in the foot. This team is far too talented to do all three of those things. And to see a team that has Super Bowl-level talent hurt themselves and hold themselves back, it just really irritates me. I wanted to be a broadcaster since I was 5 years old. I had these massive goals in life of being one of the best broadcasters in this industry. It's not going to come to me if I don't work hard. It's not going to come to me if I just mail in these shows and I shoot myself in the foot. In anything that we do in life, you have to work at it. And the Niners, it seems as though they're not working on being a disciplined football team. And as part of that, they're not tackling. They missed 24 tackles in the first 5 weeks combined. During this 3-game losing streak, they have missed 32 tackles. That right there is unacceptable. And when you can't tackle, what happens? You're unable to come up with a stop on a big 3rd down or a 4th down. That changes the momentum of a game. But also, those missed tackles can go from a loss, minimal gain, medium gain, to large chunk plays to flip the field and put the opposition in a position in which they can put points on the scoreboard. And then from offense to defense, I just think in general, since beating the Cowboys 42-10, this is a Niners team that has become lazy, they've become overconfident, and they've been really sloppy as well. And again, that is not the championship standard that we've become accustomed to seeing from this Niners organization. That's not how they've made it to 3 NFC championship games over the last 4 years. They've made it by being talented, well-coached, winning in the clutch, winning some massive games, and being in sync. And right now, this team has not been in sync during this rough patch. And for the offense simply has to produce. And I want to see Kyle Shanahan take some ownership of this a little bit more as his coaching career goes on. And luckily, after he kind of threw Steve Wilkes under the bus, he did take ownership of some of the offensive flaws. But during this rough stretch here, San Francisco has not scored more than 20 points in the last 3 games. They're missing on pull blocks. They're missing on blocking assignments. They're dropping the football. And like I said, missing tackles on the defensive side of the ball. You have to execute. And in the words of Bill Belichick, he might be cooked now, but he's one of the best coaches of all time. Do your job. And then lastly, I think the bye week comes at a really good time. Kyle Shanahan said something interesting in the aftermath of that Bengals loss. He said, after going back and looking at the film, we look slow and we look tired. And I think over the last 3 weeks, the Niners have looked banged up, and they have looked like a monotonous team that has its tires stuck in the mud. Obviously, when you have 3 All-Pros who are injured, that doesn't help matters either. And going into this bye week, it's going to allow Trent Williams, who missed the last 2 games, to basically have a month to come back from that ankle injury that he suffered on the road against Cleveland. It's going to give Christian McCaffrey some much-needed time off to repair his body. He had that small tear in his oblique, but I think he's banged up and worn down in general because his usage rate was so high the first month and change of the season. He hasn't looked right for a little while. And then with Deebo Samuel, he said he's good to go coming out of the bye week. That's great news, but the Niners have also missed him. So when you're without your left tackle, it affects your run production, pass protection, Christian McCaffrey, you kind of lack depth at that running back spot. He's been overused and hasn't been the same explosive home run hitter, even though he's scoring touchdowns every single game. And then for Debo, that affects your run game because he can run it, your pass game, picking up yards after the catch, but even some of the pre-snap motion and stuff, I think the Niners have missed some of those disguises to confuse the defense. So in general, you're going to miss Deebo Samuel. You're going to miss Trent Williams. But what can't happen and what is unacceptable, drops, penalties, turnovers, missed tackles, got to get better, and hopefully this allows the Niners that necessary time to kind of think about these things. Some more quick hitters and some more changes that I would make. Play Jordan Mason more. I'm not sure why he's not playing. I think it might come down to the fact that this coaching staff doesn't trust him because he's not good or up to their level of standard in pass protection. This is all I know. My eyes don't lie to me, and my eyes have never lied to me, right? Anytime Jordan Mason gets the football, it seems to be a positive play. So take some of the carries away from Christian McCaffrey, who you want to be fresher at the end of the year, run Jordan Mason. And I think that the Niners, the last 3 games in which they've all lost, they've missed and have lacked that physical presence. We'll run your ass over, we'll take your will. That's the identity of Jordan Mason. So I want to play him more. The Niners also have to bench Isaiah Oliver. We ran through the numbers earlier this week. Last 4 games, he is allowing a completion percentage of 100%. Can't happen. And I'd bench him, and I'd play Jair Brown. You took him in the 3rd round. Everybody was raving about him in OTAs and minicamp in the preseason, did a couple of nice things. He's a ball hawk. He's an instinctual player. He gives you another physical presence on that defense. I think that he'd try to prove himself, not miss as many damn tackles. And then the 5-man bear fronts. Steve Wilks experimented with this in practice in the preseason. We haven't seen a lot of it. Instead, all those twists, all those stunts, just delaying your ability to get after the quarterback. Now that you have Chase Young, I'm going 5-man front. You can't double team guys as much if you're the offensive line. And because of that, in turn, I think a lot of the players along this defensive line will be able to win a lot of their one-on-one matchups. So with that, you're the coach. What changes are you making? And what's your big change for San Francisco going into the bye week? Let me know down in the comments section. As always, thanks for watching the show. And if you enjoyed the program today, make sure you hit that sub button.